Hello and welcome to episode 35 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the first roster change of the 2022 Call of Duty League season. We were both wrong about which team would make that move. We'll talk about it during the show. We're also going to talk about the Week 2 qualifying matches for the first major of the Call of Duty League season. They just wrapped up this past weekend. And then we're going to give our predictions and preview the third week of qualifying matches as we get closer and closer to the first major of the season. How are you doing, Bink?
I'm doing well. Obviously, for any of our longtime viewers or fans, it's a little bit of a time change here, but excited to hop into it a little earlier and talk about these matches as always.
Yeah, so if you're listening to the podcast after the fact or watching it on YouTube or something, and you can actually watch it on Spotify now. We have the last, I think, 2 or 3 of our podcast. The video version is up on Spotify. It's part of Anchor, and yeah, I guess we're getting like a test period or whatever. So that's cool. But if you're doing that and you want to watch the live version, we stream the actual podcast at twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. We try to do it every Tuesday night. We usually do it at 11:30 p.m. Eastern. That's really late, and we had to do that because of like our work schedules didn't really match up, but now we work like identical work schedules, so it's a little bit easier for both of us. So we're doing it at 8 p.m., which is a lot nicer, and I'm probably going to be in my bed by 11:30 tonight. So yeah, I'm like Jim now. So let's get right into it. We'll talk about the roster change as we get to that match, but let's just go through these matches. We had 10 matches, qualifying matches this past week. The first of which was Paris versus Boston. So the Legion, not a great start to their season. They end up dropping this match as well. They lose 3-1 to Boston. What stood out to you, because we both thought that Boston would win?
Yeah, I think this one wasn't necessarily as close as some people might have expected. Paris had that opening matchup in their first match of the official regular season against the FaZe, where they won 2 maps and they ended up losing 3-2, but they took 2 maps off FaZe, and that kind of opened some eyes for a lot of people. I feel like in the community who started to think like Paris was performing better than expectations, and that could have led some people to feel that this match against a team like Boston, who, as we've touched on multiple times now, was formed a little late, or actually was formed the latest out of any of the rosters in the CDL. That could have led some people to think this match might have been a little bit closer, but turns out in the end, Boston just takes the win. The only map that Paris wins is Gavutu Control, which I believe, if I'm correct in this, I was looking at just Paris's overall map count is 4-12 now, which obviously they've played 4 matches. So there's another match after this, which we'll touch on then. But in total so far this year, they've won 4 maps, and 3 of those were on Gavutu. So feel like that's a trend we'll have to look at. It was something we touched on with obviously in the FaZe matchup where they won those 2 maps. Both of them were Gavutu. But other than that, this was pretty straightforward series. Boston's 3 map wins. They won Boga Hardpoint 250, 155, not really the closest. Took Tuscan Surge 6-2, and then Berlin Hardpoint 250, 141. So Gavutu Control, as a lot of the controls this year, came down to round 5. Paris wins. In round 5, if I had to guess, they likely had defense, just because that's how Control's gone this year so far. I don't actually remember, though, what side they had, but regardless of that, yeah, Boston just comes out, gets a 3-1 win. It's, before Paris's match against Atlanta, it's probably a match you think Boston is going to win, and then, maybe you were a little coin flippy on it after Paris's performance against Atlanta, but just, Boston comes out, gets the job done in this one to kick off week 2.
The second match of the week was Minnesota versus Seattle. We were both looking forward to this match because Seattle looked really good in the first week of the season, and Minnesota, they had their one match and they looked good. So we were both very excited for this. We both picked Seattle though, and we were both correct. Thanks to the Iceman, he comes up with it a 1v2 in round 11 in game 5. Just I mean, he didn't have to do a ton. Like it's not like he had to. It's not like he was trying to like diffuse or anything. So it was just really bad timing for Minnesota, and accuracy played it incredibly well and ended up winning the round, the game, and the series. What did you take away from Seattle beating Minnesota here?
Yeah, this was, the second straight match, I think, for Seattle where they actually come away with their Game 5 Round 11 victory. Yep, because their previous match in the last week was against Toronto, and that's where accuracy had the ninja diffuse on Berlin. So back-to-back matches for them where they get the Game 5 Round 11 victory. And, probably for a team like Seattle, they might not want to keep going to these Game 5 Round 11s, but if they have accuracy, they got the Iceman. I guess they can't really complain too much about it. So, like you said, this was a match we were looking forward to, and it came down to the wire, obviously. As we've already touched on multiple times, but all the maps were close. Both of the hard points were 250 to 225 and 221. The search that wasn't game 5 was 6-4, and then round 5 in the control. So super close series. Obviously, more of a heartbreaker for Minnesota just because they had that man advantage in the final round and couldn't clutch up. But yeah, the other standout aside from that to me was seeing that Standy dropped 114 kills in the series. And that's just something I personally have been trying to keep track of is who has the most kills in like series so far. And up to this point, the that was the mark to beat was 114 as far as I know. I was going through, obviously shout out Breaking Point for the stats. I was going through like the scoreboard tweets they have for post game, and in week 1 we saw 111 from Capital, Gunless, and Shotzi. So I believe Standy's 114 was the most up to this point. And yeah, obviously that came in a losing effort, which kind of surprising. But yeah, this was just super entertaining series. If you haven't seen accuracies Game 5 round 11 clutch there, you probably want to go check it out. Or if you haven't watched the series in general and you're interested in it, it's probably a good one to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Before we go on, I just want to shout out Leo. He's in the chat, coworker of ours. We probably have some first-time viewers because usually we stream much later. So shout out to my girlfriend Lauren. I think she wants me to shout her out, and I think my dog is probably watching as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. And you're watching live.
We also might get a surprise visitor on my end from Squid just because she's not asleep now that we're not doing it as late. And I am the only one home right now. I can hear her running around. So even though my door is shut and locked, she somehow finds a way to get in. And yeah, if you see somebody jump up here on my shoulders randomly during the show when you're watching, that's probably Squid.
Yeah, definitely. And we should also shout out Ego Chall correspondent Trem, who has returned from his adventure in China. So welcome back, Tremor. Let's move on. We got a Toronto versus LAG series. I'm not one to boast. You know that I don't like to say I'm right or tell you I told you so, but last week I said that I wouldn't pick LAG in their first match and instead picked them in their second match. I was correct on both of those matches. I'm not saying I'm a genius or anything, but Toronto ends up sweeping LAG here. I mean, it's not a huge surprise. Obviously, we both thought that Toronto would win. We both predicted them to win. LAG have looked a little shaky at times to start the season, and we both think really highly of Toronto. Any takeaways from this match?
It was close, probably
Yeah.
closer than some people expected, just based on initial performances. Obviously, Toronto had only played that one match in the opening week, and it was, as we just touched on a couple minutes ago, it was that Game 5 round 11 loss to Seattle in accuracy. So Toronto was looking to bounce back from that. I think Gorillas were 1-1, and they had the win against New York. So yeah, but both teams were coming in, probably Toronto was just the heavy favorite based on early season expectations, but obviously they were looking to respond from the loss in their first series, and that's what they were able to do. But LAG definitely made them work for it. It was 245 to 239 on Binkowski hardpoint, so a 6-point hardpoint map one. Tuscan Search was 6-4 for Toronto, and then Tuscan Control was 3-2 for Toronto. And if I remember correctly, it was, we had Toronto went up 0-2, and LAG almost made a 0-2 comeback in the control, but Toronto closed it out. And in the game two, Search Hugh dropped 15 kills for the loss. So definitely was probably a little closer than most people expected, but in the end, Toronto still comes away with the win.
And in the final match of Friday, we had the New York Subliners versus the Los Angeles Thieves. So New York, they made the first roster change of the season on February 11th. They officially signed Royalty. I don't know what team he would really be known for. I seem to think of Enigma 6 when I think of Royalty, but I'm not entirely sure if most people would think of that. But they signed Royalty to their roster to replace Neptune, who is now on the bench. And Crone reported this actually on February 9th, that they were targeting Royalty and that they had previously discussed him coming into the roster even before the Kickoff Classic as a substitute player, but things didn't materialize and he ended up not signing a contract. But he did end up signing with the Subliners. He did not play in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with the rest of the team. He instead, I think, was in Toronto. So he was, I think he was playing out of the Ultra like headquarters or whatever. So he was probably not having a real fun time online playing Call of Duty. But the Subliners, they make this change. Before we get into the match, any thoughts on Royalty officially joining the Subliners starting roster?
Yeah, this was definitely an interesting one. Obviously, like you said, Crone reported that it was possible that they were looking to add him as a sub like earlier in the season. So when Crone initially reported that Neptune or the Subliners were considering benching Neptune or replacing him in the starting lineup, that seemed like a direction they might go in just based on that. And that's obviously what ends up happening. So to answer your earlier question about it, for me personally, I remember Royalty, really getting his start for that King Pappy team in Black Ops 3 that ends up getting picked up by 100 Thieves. And then
Wearing
for
jail
whatever reason,
jerseys.
yeah. And Lightning Panda, I think he was on Lightning Pandas for
Yeah, he was with
World
Goon.
War II champs.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was World War II champs though or not.
I'm
But
almost
that
positive it
might,
was because there's a story with Jim that
yeah.
I
Well, I
didn't.
know he was at World War II champs,
Yeah,
but I couldn't
I'm
remember if it was
I'm
on
pretty
Lightning
sure it was.
Pandas with that. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
pretty sure.
I think that's right. Regardless, I've always thought highly of Royalty as a player. He's super well known in the community for playing on a very high sensitivity, and there's just been a lot of throughout the years of him playing. There's been some instances where he's just kind of just snaps on somebody because of that sensitivity, and it's kind of eye opening just because you don't see it that often in competitive Call of Duty. So that's just what I've always associated him with, and I've known him for. But obviously, it's been a couple years since we've seen him at the quote unquote pro level, and now he's getting his chance in the CDL. But to me, this was just obviously I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes with New York to any extent. So if they felt like they had to make a change this early, obviously something was going on. But I just from the outside looking in, this feels like a very early change. I still think Neptune's a super talented player. I for his sake and even just for the community's sake, I hope we see him back in the league relatively soon because I think he has a lot of potential and is just an exciting player to watch. But end of the day, I felt like this was a super early change and was kind of surprised. As you said, we were both wrong. And the team that we thought would make the first change, I definitely didn't think it was going to be New York. And I definitely didn't think it was going to come after 1 week of online qualifier matches. So that came as a pretty big shock to me.
Yeah. So Royalty was on the Lightning Pandas roster at COD Champs 2018, so
Okay.
in World War II. And then
Yeah.
he and a few of the Lightning Pandas guys got signed by EG, and then he played for UYU for a little bit,
Yep.
Midnight, and then Triumph, and then this like all Canadian roster in Challengers plus Parasite for a little bit. So yeah, so he's been I've known about him, and a lot of people have known about him for years and years, but he hasn't like consistently been at the pro level for like an extended period of times, it seems. But I mean, this is his big chance to make an impact. Like New York is obviously going to have a lot of eyeballs on it because you have Clayster and Krim, and they're obviously struggling right now. And if he comes in and now they start to do a lot better, I think that says a lot about him. My reaction to this was just really shocked because like it's not that shocking that Neptune would be the odd man out on this roster because that just kind of makes sense. But after I think it was just 2 matches, like that's pretty insane. Like that points to obviously something internal or just like the coaches and the rest of the team just know like there's no way that we as a team can get through this without making this change. Because it's like no offense to Royalty, but it's not like they're adding Shotzi or anything. It's not like it's like the Hook thing from last year where it's like, well, we have to do this. Like we look like idiots if we don't try and go get this player. So yeah, I thought that was very interesting, and I mean it. To me, it seemed to indicate that there was something pretty seriously wrong with this team, like in the roster construction. So
And
yeah,
as it turns out, obviously small sample size here,
yeah.
but the roster change did not result in immediate victory for the Subliners.
Nope, it did not. The Thieves, they beat New York 3-1 here. Royalty, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, was playing from Toronto, and the rest of New York was playing in Dallas. And I think everybody in the Thieves is playing in Los Angeles now. So, I mean, online is not going to be friendly to a guy playing against LA from Toronto. So, I mean, I can't, it didn't affect him, like, obviously he wasn't dropping like single digit kills or anything, but he did struggle with the first map. He went 19 and 35, and then the second map he went 10 and 8, and then he didn't do great in the final 2 maps, but he also didn't do terribly. So I don't know how much of a factor it really played in, but what did you think of Royalty's first match with New York here?
Yeah, I think that's the immediate thing everybody's gonna jump on is the paying issues and online match, and that's just something that's gonna happen when you have an online situation like that. I think more long term, and we don't have to talk about it in depth today or in this episode in particular, but um, with New York signing Royalty and him in Canada, he has to obviously get to the U.S. For the LAN event beginning of March. So for New York to make this move, they have to be relatively confident that they're not going to have any visa issues getting him here. Because if he's not able to get a visa for the first major of the year, that opens up a whole nother can of worms for the organization. But regardless of that, just based on this first map, like you said, yeah, he didn't have the best first map statistically. Um, it was close though on Bokic 250 to 206. Then New York's only map win they get in the series is 6-5 on Tuscan. He does lead. I think he led the whole lobby in kills. He definitely led New York, but I think he was the only one who dropped double digits. In map 2, yeah, he was the only one. He had 10. Krim and Octane both had 9. So he technically led New York and the game in kills in map 2. And then Everybody on New York went negative in map 3, but Royalty had the most kills at 18. And then map 2 didn't have the best performance, but, end of the day, New York was getting pretty heavily outslayed. And everybody on the team ended with overall negative KDs for the series, while everybody on the Thieves ended with positive KDs. So, you know, just goes to show that the series, especially in the respawn, you take out that search there. LA Thieves were doing their job and were slaying pretty heavily. So this was the only match we got to see of New York with the new lineup. They have 2 matches this upcoming week, and that'll give us a better idea of what's going on. With Royalty, it'll also, they'll have more time practicing with him for these upcoming matches. So we'll just have to wait and see how things shake up for them.
If New York does actually have to have a substitute for him at the major, like if he has any travel issues or visa issues, then this would just be like a really weird situation that New York had to deal with ASIM's visa issues for
Yep.
the second to last major, and then Clayster sat out the last major of last season before coming back for champs. Like, it's just a really odd situation that New York has been in. It possibly could be in for 3 consecutive majors, even across 2 seasons. So hopefully that's not an issue, and Royalty's able to join the team, without much problems. Many problems, excuse me. Then we had the next day started off with Minnesota versus London. We are like we really doubt London because so they've had 4 matches, or they've had 4 matches since, but this is just the third one. We did not pick London in any of these 4 matches. We picked Minnesota to beat London here, and then London spits in our faces and says, no, we're going to take this. And they win 3-1. They beat Minnesota, which obviously not a great look for the podcast, but London, they looked really good. What did you think of the Royal Ravens beating the Rocker here?
Yeah, I mean that's the big takeaway for me is London keeps trying to prove us wrong, up to this point at least. But they've been playing well, man. Especially, touched on it last episode a little bit, but preseason expectations and kickoff classic performance combined, there really weren't many people in the community who had high hopes for this team, especially right out of the gates. But with this victory here, they were at this point 3-0, undefeated, top of the standings. And obviously, that's very surprising for us. Went against all of our picks for those 3 series. And Gizmo in particular, up to this point, have been playing extremely well. Was dropping impressive numbers. I don't, know his like total KDs across the 3 series, but I know it was just mentioned during the broadcast and stuff that he was performing very well statistically. In this series in particular, as the tweet loads. Gizmo ended with a 1.3 KD against Minnesota, went 90 and 69. He just had been playing well. The team has been playing a lot better than myself and multiple people had imagined. And this had to be, a tough week for Minnesota, obviously coming off the high of pulling off that upset against Optic, and then opening this second week with that tough Game 5 round 11 loss to Seattle, followed by a loss here. And has them currently in 9th place, which actually doesn't make sense. No, that doesn't make sense because they beat Optic, and Optic's 1-2, and Minnesota's 1-2, and they're the only 1-2 team. So Minnesota should have the tiebreaker. Regardless of that, though, Minnesota's 1-2 right now, and potentially in a spot where if they struggle this week, they'll be starting the major in the losers bracket. So we're gonna have to see how Minnesota responds to these 2 losses in this last week. I still, I think this Minnesota team is one that's gonna have to rely on their search to pull off a lot of these victories that some teams might not expect them to, unless like some stuff changes and they just have some strong slaying performances in respawn. But I wrote it down in our notes, but I didn't actually touch on it in the Seattle series. I was just really impressed. There were multiple situations where in Minnesota's S&D where they were like they would get blooded and then they would be in a 3v4 situation and they would be able to pull off the man down retakes and just stay composed. Obviously, it didn't translate to a win in the round 11 situation where they had a man advantage. But regardless, I'm going to keep my eye on this Minnesota team, see how they perform in this upcoming week, and go from there.
Another team we talked about last week about their performance and where do they go from here, that kind of thing. Optic, they went 0-2 last week. They obviously barely lost both of those matches. Heartbreaking losses for their fans. And they played Paris. In the second match of February 12th, and they swept Paris. They get their first win of the season. They get like a comfortable win also. It's not like they were squeaking it out against Paris. So what did you think of Optic here? Did you see any difference between how they played against Paris and how they performed last week?
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously, massive difference just in terms of what they were able to accomplish. A 3-0 is much different than 2-3-2 losses, but this was almost like a must-win match for not just Optic, but like fans in particular, for like the hardcore Greenwall fans who were, devastated and freaking out after losing 2 online matches to start the season. Um, but yeah, for them to come out and get the 3-0 win, it was a big victory, big pick me up for them. Most notably in the map one Bokic hardpoint, the old Empire duo there of Shotzi and Illy combined for, I believe, 76 kills. Yeah, Shotzi dropped 41, Illy dropped 35. The most on Paris was 32, so they both had strong performances in the slaying category to kick things off there. Um, and they win Berlin search. Optic does 6-3, so they don't let it get to a round 11 situation this time, and they're able to close it out earlier, and then they win a control 3-1. I believe I wrote down they won the first round of control by capturing both zones, which I just thought was kind of funny because I don't know how many times we've seen a team actually capture both zones in Vanguard. I feel like control is very defensively favored right now. And if there is a round where a team wins an offense in control, it's usually coming down to kills instead of the teams actually capturing the zone. But this was just a case where we saw here, so I thought that was noteworthy. But yeah, other than that, this was just a simple 3-0 for Optic, what you expect them to do against a team like Paris. And maybe, this victory helps some of those Optic fans feel a little better about the state of the team right now.
We had another 3-0 right after that. Actually, excuse me. We had a 3-1 after that. We had Atlanta beating the Boston Breach. Atlanta, they lost their search and destroy on Berlin, but you're like the Gavutu expert on this podcast, and they ended up winning both of their Gavutu maps. They won the first game of the series, Gavutu Hardpoint 250-102. And then game 3 was Gavutu Control. Atlanta wins 3-2. Talk to us about Gavutu and FaZe being a absolute problem now on the map.
I wouldn't go that far just
Yeah.
yet, but that was my main takeaway from this series was just we had touched on in the past. Actually, I have this. It was 3-1. Regardless, we touched on in the previous episode where they had that match against Paris, where Paris wins both Gavutus, and we were just kind of bringing up the initial questions of, Gavutu being an AR favored map, that putting Atlanta's Tiny Terror Machine Gun duo kind of at a disadvantage just because that's not their preferred weapon. And as I said before, it's not like Simp and Abizi can't shoot straight with an AR, as they obviously proved in this series. But it was just, like an initial question that I wanted to look at personally to see how Atlanta was going to handle the vetoes moving forward, whether we were going to continue to see Gavutu in series or if they were just going to try to move on from it and play more submachine gun favored maps. And it turns out in this series, they end up playing Gavutu twice and they win it twice. So I'm still going to keep my eye on that for FaZe just because, it's such a star-studded roster. And when you're like almost I still think Atlanta's the best team in the game, even though Seattle can kind of make a claim for that right now in their current state. When you're a top team like that, teams are always going to try to find weaknesses and try to exploit them to give them whatever tiny advantage they can seek. And it seemed like just initially that Gavutu could be a problem for FaZe, but they come out here and they're like, yeah, we can play Gavutu, so it doesn't really matter. So we're gonna have to see. I'm gonna still keep my eye on it in FaZe's matches just to see how much it's popping up, if they are vetoing it, or if I don't feel like they're gonna be the team picking it. I could be wrong. I don't remember the vetoes for this one. In particular, I feel like other teams would pick Gavutu if it's not vetoed to try and force them on a 3 AR map. But either way, going to keep my eye on that, see how much we see FaZe on Gavutu. And that's really the only main takeaway that I remember for this one in particular. It's just, I think most people expected Atlanta to come out and take care of business against Boston. And that's what happens. And most notably, we had Abizi and Celium here. Both dropped 1.41 KDs. Overall, Abizi went 171 and Cell went 83 and 59.
Yeah, they're pretty good at Call of Duty, I think.
I think that's good. Good analysis.
Last match of the of Saturday, we had Los Angeles Thieves versus Florida Mutineers. This was the first match of the weekend that we actually disagreed in our predictions. I think to this point we had so we were lock and step the entire way. We got the Minnesota versus London game wrong, but we disagreed. You went with LAT, I went with Florida. I think I predicted some online shenanigans. Yep. I don't know if they really came into play, but this was a really tight series. Went to game 5. In Florida, they almost come back and pull off a full sail, and but they're unable to. They lose 6-4 in the final S&D, and the Thieves win this series. What are your takeaways from LAT beating Florida?
Yeah, I thought this was a super entertaining series. Map 1 was what we come to expect from Bokage early in the season here. It was just massive slaying numbers and just a lot of engagements. And was this the one? So this was the one where Vivid goes 45 and 40. And for anybody who had been watching the broadcast before, so it would have been week 1. They did a post-match interview after the match. Florida won because I think Vivid dropped like 40-something kills in a Bokage hardpoint. Nameless said he would personally give Vivid $1,000 if Vivid dropped 80 interactions on a map. And sure enough, the next time he plays Bokage, he comes out and drops 85. And the broadcast didn't let him get away with it. They played a clip of it after the match, and sounds like Vivid's got a decent payday, even though he doesn't get the win in this series. I guess that's silver lining for him in this one. Regardless, it was a super that was an entertaining map. Vivid does drop 45. Envoy drops the most kills though. He goes 46 and 33. Just superstar performance out of him there. And then we go to the search, and Florida takes the 6-4 win in Berlin search, and they take the control 3-2 as well, putting Thieves on the back foot there. But then Thieves come out and win maps 4 and 5 to close things out. And most notably, as I was touching on earlier in the episode with Standy's series against Seattle, Envoy ends the series with 115 kills, which as of now, as long as I haven't missed something in the post-match breakdowns or scoreboards from Breaking Point, I believe 115 kills is the most we've seen out of any individual player for a best of 5 series in Vanguard competitive.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like, just to even get that many kills across a series against the top competition. I guess it does help when Vivid is sprinting across the map every time he respawns, and he dies 40 times and gets like 86 interactions. Like being able to kill him a few times does help boost your stats. But Envoy just he's an incredible player. Really surprised that he isn't on the Optic roster, to be honest. But LAT, they win this 3-2. That was the final match of Saturday, and then we just had two matches on Sunday because they flexed one of the matches from Sunday to Friday because of the Super Bowl. They didn't want to go like head to head. Obviously, we know who would win there. So LAG and London were the first match on Sunday. LAG, they win. So my boys, they come through. They beat London. They stop the runaway train that is the Royal Ravens, and they keep some dignity to this podcast. Any thoughts on London's first loss of the CDL season?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I was fully expecting going into Sunday's match for London to win this one, just because up to this point they made us 0-3 in predicting their matches. So I was like, yeah, London's look good so far. They're probably gonna come out, take care of business against the Gorillas, and then we're gonna be wrong, and we're gonna have predicted London to go 0-4, and they'll be 4-0. That's not what happens though. LAG shockingly to me wins 2 hard points to get the job done here. London had looked really strong in hard point in particular. Obviously, they were undefeated coming into this, so they were looking good overall. But there were some stats going around on the broadcast and stuff about the London style in hardpoint was very like break reliant as opposed to properly like rotating ahead of time and trying to set up for hard points, and that may have been something that LAG was able to exploit here. But end of the day, Gorillas do get the 3-1 victory. They win the first hardpoint 250 to 242. They take Berlin, search 6-5. London wins the control, but then Gorillas close it out 250 to 159 on Berlin hardpoint. So was interested in that regard, especially that I was surprised that the Gorillas actually pulled off this win at this point because, like I said, I was expecting London to kind of take away after their earlier performance in the week and leading up to that point. And then two, that the way Gorillas did it was by taking 2 hard points off of London. And we look at the stats. ASIM led the entire lobby with 1.32 KD, went 83 and 63. Slasher had the most kills at 88 and 76. And this was just the first victory of Sunday for a team owned by the Kroenke family.
It's true. It was a heartbreaking Super Bowl for anybody that wanted the Bengals to win, but like me, probably not you, but definitely me.
I actually didn't care.
I'm a Browns fan, and there are some people that think, the Bengals being the only other Ohio NFL team, like Browns fans hate Bengals fans and Bengals fans hate Browns fans. I mean, we've sucked like both teams have sucked for so
Yeah.
long that why would you hate them? It's like hating the Lions or something. Like why would you hate them? But yeah, it was a good day for Stan Kroenke, even though I'm sure he has no idea that the Gorillas even won this match. I don't think he gets updates on his phone about that. Yeah, I think he was a little busy with stuff.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And then we had the last match of the weekend. We had Toronto versus Florida. This ended up being a sweep, but like it really was really close. It was as close as a 3-0 sweep can pretty much be. 1 point separated them in hard point. 1 round separated them in search and destroy, and then another round 5 going down to the wire game on control. But Toronto, they clutched up. They won each of those 3 games and come away with a sweep. Any thoughts on this game, or on this match, excuse me?
Yeah, so this was most noteworthy because Hicksy made his CDL debut. He was signed earlier in the season just to be Toronto's substitute as an EU Challengers player. and I don't believe they said officially what was going on with Cammy. I think they just said he was feeling sick or under the weather. But regardless, Hixie came in and played for Cammy. So my thoughts initially here were that Toronto might struggle a little bit. Because just a last minute substitution like that, emergency situation, you don't really know what to expect. And we touched on it again, like you were talking about with the Thieves versus Florida match, the online, cross continent match. There could have been some issues going from Toronto to Florida here too. Um, but yeah, like you said, it was a super close match. In particular, the game one hard point was another Bokage hard point that was 221 to 220. And I tweeted out the clip at the end of the game just because like I really there's been plenty of complaints about Vanguard, and there have been plenty of complaints about Bokage in particular, like the spawns and a whole bunch of stuff like that. But from just a viewership perspective, there have already been so many entertaining moments on Bokage, and um, I just, again, not from playing or anything like that for that perspective. I can't speak on that, but um, it's been a very entertaining map to watch, in my opinion. And this was another example of it coming down to the time and only being a 1 point victory for Toronto. And then, like you said, too, 6-5 in control, 3-2 in the, or 6-5 in search, 3-2 in the control. Toronto gets the 3-0, but it was definitely as close of a sweep as you can get.
Personally, I love the small maps. In Treyarch games, I love playing Newtown and I love playing Shipment. Like that's just kind of I want to like constantly be like watching or doing something, and like watching these maps is really entertaining. I know it probably really sucks to play when you're when you kill someone and then they spawn directly behind you and kill you. I'm sure that really sucks, but yeah, like you said, from a spectator point of view, it's pretty entertaining if you can keep up with the action, because sometimes things go a little too quickly and then you're like, I don't know what's going on anymore. But hopefully fans and new viewers are coming in and they're enjoying what they see, because maybe they'll stick around. Maybe they'll check out the Ego Chall podcast. Who knows? But yeah, that was it for the matches for week 2 of I guess they're qualifier, but they're really seeding matches
Yeah.
for the first major. Um, Before we move on to give our predictions, we should just, I know you commented in the chat, but we should just kind of look at Jim's power rankings, and like, we don't need to roast him or anything. I'm just saying, like, what what would you change from his power rankings, or like, so right now, for anyone that isn't in the chat and listening afterward, so Jim has Seattle at 1, then Toronto, LAT, Atlanta at 4, Optic at 5, Minnesota, London, Boston, LAG, Florida, New York at 11, and then Paris. Mike is not going to be happy about that. Paris is at 12. So you don't need to like really list yours, but what stands out to you when you look at those power rankings?
I really didn't want to give him the time of day. Just for one, Jim hasn't watched all the games, so um, I don't think he really knows what he's saying in this regard for the power rankings. But LAT at 3 is just kind of wild to me, especially because they're 2-1, and I guess in that regard they have a good record, but there are also multiple other teams that are 2-1. Um, so for me, I feel like from a tiered perspective, you have the 2 undefeated teams, Seattle and Atlanta, and that S tier right now. I would even probably consider Toronto like just on the brink of S tier or the top of A. But
Yeah.
again, they had that opening loss to Seattle, and then we in there, even though they went 2-0 this past week, they still didn't play with Cammy in their last match. Who knows if that's like a long term thing? illness. We don't know too much around that, so there's question marks there for Toronto, but they're still obviously a really good team, super talented. And just for me, that like the biggest switch is London. I feel like you have to. Obviously, we haven't been going with them in our picks, but you got to show them some love, and they've been playing well, so they would be higher up in my power rankings if I was to actually take some time and sit down and think about them.
Yeah, well, we've talked about it like in the work chat and like privately about power rankings and how they're really difficult to do because like what are you basing your power rankings off of? Like I like to think of it like
Yeah.
if the season ended right now, like who's the most likely to win a championship? Because otherwise I can't really even conceptualize like what's actually supposed to be accomplished with power rankings. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Toronto, I would put them in the like the S tier with Atlanta and Seattle because that's just like my belief in them. Like I think they could on on a given day beat those two teams. Where I don't think there's any other team at the moment like that I think they could beat Atlanta or Seattle. But yeah, I don't disagree with him like too much on all the other stuff other
No,
than
yeah.
London because I mean we don't give respect to London in those individual matches, but I mean we're not the end all be all. I mean you've been doing a lot better in predictions than I have, but I mean we didn't expect one of the worst teams from last year, and we really haven't gotten to see a lot of these players like compete at this level. We didn't expect them to be good. That's a huge shocker, everybody. But yeah, they've been doing really well, and they deserve the praise for being at the moment. I guess they're tied for second because they have one more like series. So they've won the same amount as FaZe in Seattle, but they've also lost a series, I guess, is how they're going
Yeah.
about it. So, but yeah, not a huge difference in opinion there.
No, and I think we don't got to touch on London too much, but like
Mm-hmm.
um that their best player, as I was kind of bringing up statistically, has been Gizmo, and he's the player we literally knew the least about. Like we obviously saw Afro in the CDL at the end of last year. We saw Zero in the CWL and in the CDL's first season, had the visa issues last year, but we know about Zero, and we had at least heard about Nasty. He was signed as a sub during London's NW season, didn't get to make his debut, but we had heard good things. I personally had heard good things about him, and I know like Gizmo played in challengers with Afro and Nasty as far as I know, but like outside of that I didn't know anything about him, and he's been the best player on the team. So um like we said, we haven't been picking them, and they've been proving us wrong for the most part, but gotta show them some respect there.
Yeah. Let's move on. We have these predictions we got to get through. Week 3 of the Call of Duty League season. We're getting really close to the first major, and these matches are really important for seeding. So we have 3 matches on Friday, February 18th. The first of which is Paris versus the Los Angeles Thieves. Paris not doing too hot right now. LAT coming off of a victory. Who do you got? LAT versus Paris.
Gotta go with the Thieves here. Maybe a little bit of a revenge story here for Donnie Temp, playing against his former organization, and I think he's pretty close with some of the guys there on that team, especially Kenny. But yeah, I think the Thieves come out and take this one here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Paris has to kind of prove that they're able to win these kinds of matches before we pick them. The pretty much the exact opposite of Atlanta. That it's a kind of a wait and prove it game for them.
I
So
will say, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it is somewhat interesting just because we were talking about the power rankings. Like I think um, the real best way to do a power rankings will be like after the first major. That'll be like a good sample size, and like using each major, like the 3 weeks of online plus the land, and instead of like doing like week by week power rankings or whatever. I think that's like the best sample size we can get with the current format. But like just looking at the standings, sure, New York is 0-3 and Paris is 0-4, But I don't know if I would. You could make the argument in my case that Paris would be 11 and New York would be 12th in power ranking simply because Paris has a 4 and 12 map count and New York has 2 and 9. So um, it's kind of being nitpicky there at the bottom of the barrel, but um, that's just something like we touched on earlier with Paris. They've been able to win some Gavutu, so we saw. I think LA Thieves. If I have, I closed out of the results, but I think I'm pretty sure the Thieves played Gavutu Control and Hardpoint against New York. So this could be a match where we see Gavutu get through for both teams, and we see how it goes. But yeah, like a long-winded way of just saying Thieves are going to take it, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point about the sample size. And in New York, like, even if you kind of disregard the total map count or whatever, New York obviously has a lot less practice time with this current
Yep.
roster than Paris, who that everybody's been saying they've been practicing so much, like, and they haven't made a roster change, so they have that time together. But I'm still gonna go with LAT, just the same as you.
Yeah,
Next
yeah.
match of the day, we have Atlanta FaZe versus Minnesota Rocker. Rocker had kind of a rough week, but they're still. I mean, they were literally a 2v1 win away from beating Seattle, who is being considered like one of the best teams in the league. So it's a tough pill to swallow there, but I know that I'm gonna go with the Atlanta FaZe. No shocker there because
Yeah.
they're pretty awesome.
Yep. I'm going with phase two. It is worth mentioning, Minnesota's got two of the original Atlanta phase members there in Priest and Major Maniac. So they know both teams know each other very well here. Obviously, all the pro teams know each other pretty well at this point, aside from like the European rookies and stuff like that. But yeah, in this matchup in particular, I think it might be a little closer. Then on paper, some people might just be expecting like a 3-0 here, but I feel like Rocker, we've talked about it when talking about Minnesota. They have a strong coaching staff. They're going to do their VOD review. They could come out here, steal a map, and make it closer than some people expect, but still going with FaZe.
Last match of Friday, probably the match of the week, or at least in my opinion, Toronto versus Optic. Optic, they're coming in with a 1-2 record. They obviously kind of need to win. At least one of these matches. Like, they don't want to start in the losers bracket of their own major tournament. It just wouldn't be a great environment to do that. But I don't know. I'm gonna go with Ultra. It just like I said a little bit earlier. I think they're one of the three best teams in the entire league. And Optic, they have a shot to be in that top 3 or top 4 because they have so much talent on this roster. But I just feel more confident in picking Ultra here.
Yeah, it is worth mentioning though. We have to keep an eye out for the Cammy situation.
Yeah.
If Cammy doesn't play in this match, I think that changes things a little bit. I'm still going to pick Toronto here, but I'm making that pick fully expecting Cammy to play. If Hixie's playing again instead of Cammy, I might go with Optic, but I don't even know if like that changes enough to uh stay like completely swing the series necessarily. Like obviously Cammy's just a really good player, and uh I'm not like discrediting Hixie or anything like that, but I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens, but I'm gonna go with Toronto for now here.
Yeah, I would like to set the record straight. If Hixie is starting in place of Cammy next week, my pick is officially Optic because
Okay.
I think really highly of Cammy as do you, and that seems like a huge player to be missing against a team
Yeah.
like Optic.
Yeah.
We have 4
I'll stick
matches.
with
You're gonna stick with Optic or Ultra no matter
I'll
what.
stick with Toronto no matter what, yeah. But
All
I
right.
marked down your caveat for Cammy here.
All right, we have 4 matches on Saturday, starting off with the Seattle Surge and the Florida Mutineers. I mean, I'm gonna go with Seattle because they've proven to be really good, and Florida has kind of let me down at various points over like the past year, and I don't feel like picking them. They're kind of like my new LAG, where I really like them. I believe in them a lot at certain points, and they just haven't been up to my standard, which is a very high standard, obviously. So I'll pick Seattle here.
You're not gonna bring up online though. Pretty sure Seattle is in Seattle.
I'm still gonna go with like it's gonna be horrible for both of these teams, I'm sure. So if it's equally horrible, it should go to Seattle.
Yeah, I'm picking Seattle here too. Uh, don't think I'm gonna go too in depth in it. Just expect Seattle to win this one.
Which is a very odd thing to say considering the past two seasons, where they're
Yep.
getting the phase treatment, where it's like, I'm not going to pick against them until they prove us why we shouldn't. But yeah, congrats to the Surge. They're doing really well. The next match of the Saturday, we have New York Subliners versus the Boston Breach. I don't see. Oh, I don't know. Like, this is tough because you don't really know how much New York has of practice with royalty and like how that's going to affect them. I'm going to go with New York. I still kind of believe in them because like I think this is a really good roster. With Neptune or royalty, I thought that was a good roster. So I'm going to go with the Subliners, but I'm fully expecting the Breach to break my heart here.
Yeah, I'm going with Boston. For basically the reasons you just said. I feel like Boston has been one of those teams that's been practicing a lot since they came together, and we did see New York beat them in the Kickoff Classic, I believe. But obviously, that's a different roster now, and like you said, the practice with royalty is going to be a factor. Um, so yeah, I think Boston comes out and takes this one.
Next match we have Minnesota versus LAG. Minnesota, I mean, I'm not gonna say probably, but probably gonna come off of a loss on Friday against FaZe. If not, they're coming off of a huge win coming into this match against LAG. Who do you got, Minnesota versus LAG?
I think this is going to be a really like you were saying, like Toronto Optic is the match of the day on Friday and stuff, and like I feel like this is like a sleeper for a really good matchup that
Yeah,
like some people might not expect. I kind of want you to go first just to see if you're gonna hop on the LAG train or not.
I was kind of
I'm
hoping that
leaning
you would
Minnesota.
say something to like convince me one way or the other because
I'm gonna lean Minnesota then. I could see this going either way. I think it comes down to um game five most likely. And if it does come down to game five, then I expect Minnesota to win. But at the same time, the Gorillas are coming off that win against London where they took 2 hard points. And I think Gorillas should be a better hardpoint team than Minnesota. So if they don't, just thinking about the series like that, if LAG can take either map 2 or 3, they should win 3-1. But if Minnesota is at least able to win 2 and 3 and get to a game five, they have a good shot at winning 3-2.
see the thing is you just convinced me of both teams at the same time. So I'm not.
That's what I'm saying. I could see either team winning.
uh, since you went with Minnesota, I'll go with LAG. And LAG are my boys, and I love. I need them to really like make my merch purchase like worth it in the end. Yeah, I mean maybe it's like a Stan Kroenke thing. Maybe they're just on a hot streak now. They're
Yeah,
gonna go win champs or something, and I don't know. Yeah, I'll go with LAG, but I honestly don't really know. And then we have that last match of Saturday. We have the other Los Angeles team, the Thieves, versus the Toronto Ultra. I mean, I'm gonna go with the Ultra. If I think they're gonna
yeah.
beat Optic, I probably am gonna think they're gonna beat LAT.
That's what my thinking is here too. Is as long as Cammy plays, I'm expecting Ultra to take this one. But I think this could be a close one. They played in the Kickoff Classic, right?
Sounds
I don't
right.
remember the score. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did. And I think it was like a close series. So I think this will be another entertaining one. Should have a lot of entertaining matches this weekend. Teams trying to avoid the loser bracket in that first major. So um, think this should be a good one, but I'll go with Toronto too.
We have 3 pretty interesting matches on Sunday. Like the standing should be a lot more clear, or like, you know, the scenarios should be pretty wild going into this day, because we, you know, obviously have 7 matches before. But the final 3 matches on Sunday, the first is London versus Seattle. So, I mean, we've been sleeping on London, obviously, but they've looked really, really good. Seattle have looked incredible. I am going to go with Seattle. No surprise that I'm picking against London again, but
Yep.
I think it's justified to pick Seattle here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll go with Surge here.
That's my thinking too. I mean, I already picked against London 4 times in these qualifier matches.
What's a
Might as well
5th?
make it 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, again, it's not anything against London. It's not anything against this roster, but like if they just keep winning, then we'll eventually pick them, because they'll just prove to us that they're, you know, probably one of the best teams in the entire league. But right now I'm just thinking like Seattle might be as good as Atlanta, or just like right under them, and like, why would I pick against them?
Yep.
And then we have Boston versus Optic, which will be really interesting, depending on how these 2 teams do in their respective matches. Optic, they play Ultra in the first day. Boston, they play New York on Saturday. I'm going to go with Optic. I think I'm kind of sleeping on the Breach as well, but I just find it hard to pick against Optic most of the time.
I really wanted to pick Boston here. Boston was scrimming Optic a decent amount early in the season, and you know, before the actual regular season started, and they were performing well against Optic. You know, I was watching Method stream and stuff. So obviously that's just online scrims, but I was thinking about this one for a while. I think this one and the Minnesota series were the 2 like I had to think about the most in terms of predictions. I'm going to go with Optic, but I wouldn't be surprised if Boston pulls off the upset.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really tough match to pick. A lot of these are. It's not like last week where we agreed on, I think, all but 1 or 2 matches, and we did really well in predictions because it was essentially one good team or one great team versus one, you know, mediocre to bad team. But it's not like this this week, and I'm very fortunate for that. Final match of the weekend and the final qualifying match before we go to LAN. Atlanta FaZe versus the New York Subliners. Not going to pick the Subliners on this one. I'm going to go with FaZe.
Yeah, I don't think, even if New York still had Neptune here and they hadn't made a roster change, I feel like this is still a straightforward FaZe pick. Yeah, I don't think there's really much to say. This is one you expect FaZe to win.
Yeah, we don't like. I'm sure some of our listeners are like, I wish they would, you know, explain it a little bit more, like their thought process behind some of these picks. But at the end of the day, it's a gut feeling a lot of times, and especially with Atlanta, it's all gut feeling. Like, I don't have to look at a bunch of stats or, you know, like look at the gameplay and analyze it to know that Atlanta is an incredible team, and that 90% of the time I should pick them because they are essentially more talented than the other roster, and they might have the most chemistry in the entire league because they've been together for a while now. So yeah.
And I'm for anybody thinking that train of thought and not breaking it down. I broke down that Minnesota LA Thieves or LAG series, like, you know,
I just meant Atlanta
pretty.
specifically.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, you know, there are some matches like that Minnesota LAG one where you can break it down like that, and you expect, you know, analytically Gorillas to be a better hardpoint team, Minnesota might be a better search team, so then you know, consider it like that. But then you get a match like this where Atlanta are 3-0 coming into this week, and New York are 0-3, made the first roster change in the league. Like, this is one that you don't have to think that hard about.
Yeah, I just meant in general for Atlanta because it honestly, other than maybe Seattle and Toronto, like those are the only 2 matches at the moment that I would really give like even a considerable amount of thought into like, okay, maybe this team can beat Atlanta. Just because I mean Atlanta's so good. Like we literally have been saying this since the podcast started like a year ago that Atlanta's so good. Like why would you pick against them?
Yeah.
And they ended up having like an 88% win loss ratio last year. Like it's kind of ridiculous. And then they won a world championship. So yeah, Atlanta matches are going to be hopefully short and sweet for both of us for the majority of predictions. Yeah, but that's it. We just did about an hour. That's kind of the sweet spot that I hope we can hit because I know some of these podcasts, like especially last year, I think we did a 2 hour podcast one time, and
Yeah, it was the Champs preview.
yeah, I was exhausted after that. Like talking for 2 hours is pretty tiring. But we've done just about an hour here, and I think we've hit quite a bit. We got through the both the week 2 recap and the week 3 predictions. It should be a really exciting week of Call of Duty. I think this is the most excited I've been for a week so far, just based on the matchups. I think there are a lot more competitive matchups, and we do know quite a bit more about how these teams play now that we've seen them like 3 or 4 times. So I'm pretty excited. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited too.
Yeah. So if you have anything, if you don't have anything else, we could wrap up the show. Subscribe or like or follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. We're on Spotify. You can actually watch our podcast on Spotify. You can watch the podcast on YouTube. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, pretty much any major podcasting platform we're on. You can follow us on Twitter. You're at jbink with 2Ks. I'm at Pres Byers. And the podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. You can also tune in next week. Hopefully we're doing a show on Tuesday, February 22nd at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's the plan right now. And we'll be doing a live show at twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. I think my voice is giving up on me after talking this much. But yeah, we do a live show every week for the podcast, and then the VOD or the audio version goes up like a few hours later. So the podcast actually might get uploaded a little bit earlier, maybe real late on Tuesday or real early on Wednesday, depending on how slow or fast my internet is. But yeah, that does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yeah. Thank you guys as always for tuning in. You can let us know. Obviously, this is just the first episode for those of you tuning in to the live stream on Twitch. Shout out all you guys and everybody we shouted out earlier for tuning in. Thank you as always. But yeah, you can let us know what you think about this new earlier start time that we're going to be aiming for. Hopefully, with the show not being as late, we can get some of our more friends in here. Maybe get some more interaction in the chat, all that good stuff. But yeah, thank you guys for those of you tuning in. Excited for this final week of the online matches, and then we get into that first LAN of Vanguard very shortly. So looking forward to it, and thank you guys as always. I've said that a couple times now, but yeah, remember to send the chow.